So, natural systems are very complex, and I am not going to pretend by any stretch of the imagination that I know it all. Far from it. There's not many days go by, even when I'm out in the field, that I don't learn something new or observe something new and think, oh, have I been doing it right all these years? But I have been involved in restoration projects for quite a long time now. I started off with a career in horticulture actually, but then in the late 80s I was in Nelson and ended up being part of a conservation corps with DSIR down there, which was a really great introduction to the world of restoration and conservation, and I got to do some really cool things like some of the first outcome monitoring on Breaksea Island, which was one of the first places where rodents were eradicated from, and sort of real breakthrough technology at that time. And we actually reintroduced novel weevils to the island when I was there. So, and since then I've also worked for DOC. I worked for DOC for 10 years, 6 years as a ranger based in Onga. And that's why the Ruahine and Tuki, I know those rangers very, very well. And for the last 13 years I've been doing this private conservation company work, which has been a real mix of management and hands-on restoration work. And I guess that's why I'm up here talking to you today, is just to share some of what I have learned over the last 25, 30 years. So, in terms of ecological restoration, and I'm sure maybe Bruce or somebody else has talked about this in your talks yesterday, and it's really important when we're talking about pest control is to firstly define where you want to be at the end, because that really dictates how much effort you're going to put in and how much resource you're going to put in. So, you know, do you want a fully functioning ecosystem, and what does that look like? How do you measure it? Or do you want to perhaps just have really good kiwi survival? Or do you want to conserve lizard species or bring lizard species back to an area? Or do you simply, and I say simply, want to help take nitrates and phosphates off your land and go into the rivers? So you really need to think about where you want to be at the end. So it really depends on what you're trying to achieve. So, so before we get into a little bit more of that, I'm going to just talk about some underlying ecological principles, and this is called the who eats who principle. It's pretty simple. So in this chart here, this is quite a simple food web. We've got our primary producers at the bottom. So these are plants, photosynthesizers. We've got our primary consumers next up, secondary consumers after that, and our tertiary consumers at the very end. And you can see how they're related to herbivores, omnivores, carnivores. So I've got a little exercise for you to do. On the ends of all the tables are some post-it notes. If you could just take one or two and pass them on. I want you to think of a critter, New Zealand critter. Okay, the very first thing you think of. It doesn't have to be native, and a critter could be a plant, as when we're talking about critters of the week. It could be a plant, it could be an animal. The very first one you think of. Okay, write it down on your post-it. Done? Yep. So now, let's see here is called the Pyramid of Life, and some of you have seen this last weekend, and if you have, please don't kind of give the game away too much. But I'm just going to put this up here and stand to one side, and if you can come and put your post-it to where you think it fits on this Pyramid of Life. And yeah, there is quite a lot of clues up on that slide. So go, but don't run each other over.
You'll be wrong.
Oh! No ducks?
Nope. You'll be surprised.
I'll be surprised.
You'll be surprised.
Oh,
See if you can pick mine up.
funny.
Oh, this is an upside. Down one.
Phosphor next to you, Bruce.
Why would you do that?
I've got one of each. Yeah. I thought it was animal first, and then I thought that's a good too.
Well,
she did say critter. Yeah.
What's interesting?
Okay, let's have a look at what we've got. Humans, yes, right at the top. Humans, cats, roo-roo, rats, some birds, cockroaches, rabbits in here, weta, possums, weta, lots of weta, aphids, emerald butterfly, nice, weta, coda, dragonflies. Ooh, that was Belinda, was it? No?
That was me, I wasn't sure.
Ah, that's cool, yep, dragonflies. So I'm just seeing what we've got. And we've got forest ringlet butterfly down here, honeysuckle, Gracillina lucida, Spora mobdatum, So, yep, and then there's quite a convoluted thing in here. There's not that many plants in here, and that's good. So, let's just have a look at what it should look like. So this is I've taken this off the net, and this is a American ecosystem here, but nonetheless these sorts of numbers actually do apply to our ecosystems here as well. So down here we have our primary producers, these are the plants, primary consumers, secondary, tertiary, and the big thing is to notice that down here we should have 10,000 primary producers, plants, to every one quaternary consumer. So every top-end predator, there should be 10,000 plants to supply that. What we've gone and done in New Zealand is added a whole lot more things to the top and cut down on the numbers of things that we have here. So, and in many cases we have monocultures. So this is a great underlying principle to understand, because it means that we understand the impact that the things that we're striving to do in ecological restoration, but also the impact that pest animals and plants have, and our own actions as well.
Okay, just around that, so the quaternary is what you referred to last weekend as apex, but the scavengers, do they have a different group of their own, or they Well, I know.
So this, because this is a North American ecosystem, it doesn't quite line up with what we have here. Although, yeah, you know, so
Korea are both scavengers and
Yeah.
consumer, aren't they? So
and in our natural ecosystems, without introduced those, a lot of these things in here are actually insects, and a lot of our top predators are insects as well. And then we have, you know, or birds may be a very top predators in a natural system, yeah, or the tertiary consumers. So it's just quite a good thing to keep in mind. I don't know whether Bruce or any of the others would like to add anything to that.
Well, yeah, that's why we've been focusing on plants.
Yeah. Exactly.
Because what tends to happen in New Zealand, of course, is a lot of people focus on birds.
Yep.
And that's a good thing if you understand the interaction and the triangle and the fact that the bird can be used as a focal species. But
Yep.
the bottom line is if you forget, and that's what a lot of people do, they forget about the things in the other layers in your triangle.
Yeah.
We forgot about the carnivorous plants, though.
Carnivorous
They
plants.
meet up there.
Is that what you put up?
No.
And it's also why the bits of bush that we have left, or the habitats that we have left, whether they're terrestrial or wetland, are so important, because they have this diversity that we can't possibly hope to create by planting. Well, not in our lifetimes anyway, you know, maybe that will happen eventually, but you know, even if we plant, you know, 50 different species in an area, and that's cool, we're starting to get there, but we're not going to recreate 600-year-old trees that have such a huge biomass and support so many more things than what we can do with just planting. So I just wanted to sort of just have that in the back of your mind as we go through talking about some of these other things. Right. So when we're talking about restoration, I also just wanted to put this in. Oh, that's not quite there, but so this there's a couple of different scenarios going on here. When we could be restoring existing natural indigenous cover, or we could be starting from scratch and converting pasture. And there's a lot of both of these going on. But it's just something to bear in mind that if you're converting pasture, so that pyramid also applies to underground. And if you're converting pasture, you may be missing some of the things that should be in there. And I'm not a soil ecologist by any stretch of the imagination, but I do know that some things such as mycorrhizal fungi are very important in the establishment of plants, and something Louise and I did at Sherwood School in their nursery is we actually made some tea from forest litter that we presume it had quite a lot of the fungi in it, and we actually dipped all those plants in this tea before we planted them, and if you look at those plants, they do seem to have done a whole lot better than other ones. We didn't really run it as an experiment, and there's probably some other sort of causal factors in there as well, but like perhaps they didn't get a hard frost on them, but they do seem to have done much better. So yeah, just something to consider if you are looking at converting pasture. There's more than meets the eye. Okay, so as Bruce said, the plants are the basis of diversity. They're the primary producer, as we've just shown, but they also give that biomass and that spatial distribution for all the things that live in them. And for those of you who may not have seen this sort of thing before, but this is basically what a terrestrial forested system should have. It should have all these different layers, and that creates that biomass and the different sort of habitats that things are living in. when I talk about pest plants, I really like to focus on what are the plants that actually matter. Not every introduced plant that is in your ecosystem is going to cause you problems or is going to be bad. And in fact, some of the introduced plants may add value. So when we're talking about plants that matter, we're talking about things that alter the natural ecosystem processes. So that's such things as regeneration, succession, and of course it decreases diversity and sometimes creates a monoculture. And the other thing is affecting our positive interventions such as planting. Excuse me. So I'm just to give you some examples of those. So this is,
Lindsay bush?
no, it's not Lindsay bush.
Oh,
It's English ivy. Lovely, horrible English ivy. So this photo here was taken in Puahanui bush, which some of you will have heard of and many of you may not have, but it's 130 hectare bush in just by Tikokino. And when we started controlling ivy in there, it was covering approximately 100 hectares of the 130 hectares. And as we were working away on it, we did a whole lot of sort of trials to work out the best ways to do it. Yeah. We're thinking, are we really, is what we're doing really going to make a difference? Because it wasn't 100% cover in all the places like this, and there were some native plants that were coming up through. I was thinking, you know, are we really, is it really actually we need to be doing this? So we did a whole lot of 1 metre square plots, and we measured everything that was in them and counted all the different types of seedlings and trees that were in these 1 metre square plots. And there were a couple of things that came out of that. We were able to look at how good our actual weed control was in the end. But we were also able to look at what was happening to the diversity. And what we discovered was that in places where there was ivy, there were these 8 species were missing completely from that area. So that's one of the ways that ground covers, decrease diversity in your forest. So they stop. Some species may get through them, and I think the same would go for periwinkle and Tradescantia. There'll be some species that get through, but some of the species that you're wanting to keep your diversity in your forest, a lot of them won't get through. So we've been controlling ivy there for about 18 years now, and I'm pretty happy to say we're just in the maintenance phase, the final maintenance phase. And wherever you go now where there was ivy, all of these species are now evident, except our large-leaved coprosma. And that is because, anybody, any ideas? Because,
All male trees.
no?
Deer?
Yes, because we've got deer in there as well, and also rabbits and a few other things which I'll talk about later. But the coprosmas are particularly palatable, and so there is the odd one there, but yeah, they've generally been grazed out.
Did you start having some in there and have you got rid of them, or you decided not to plant any?
No, so this all this restoration that's happened in there since we've got rid of ivy is just self, yeah, because it's a huge bush. It's 130 hectares, and so the seed source is all there already. So you're not having to go in and plant. This is restoring areas that are already there but have got problems. Yeah. Puahanui bush. It's on Griffiths station. Some of you will have heard of Griffiths, which is
Is it with a
which
big
is the Cornish
homestead?
way of saying it, not guavas. Yep, on State Highway 50 down by Cooking Hill. Yep,
Did that escape from a homestead near there?
yes. So Guava's garden is right by there.
Is that a big fancy, wonderful homestead?
Big fancy wonderful
Okay,
homestead.
yeah.
And what happened was that there, you know, it's a Cornish woodland garden that's been recreated there, and Ivy's part of that. Between the two world wars, there was no one living in the house because all the men went back to England to fight for the home country. And yeah, then a whole lot of plants escaped from there then when they weren't under control. Because ivy doesn't, only seeds when it climbs trees. It doesn't seed when it's on the ground. Anyway, I digress. So this photo is taken in Waipatiki Domain Reserve, just to the north of us here. So this is just depicting what some of the shrubby, woody weeds do. This is Cotoneaster branchetti, and as you can see, it's all of this here is Cotoneaster. So those woody weeds have that ability to take over that whole understory eventually, particularly things like Cotoneaster and Darwin's barberry, which are very happy to grow in the shade. And obviously these also take over low environments that have a naturally low stature, like wetlands or alpine or limestone bluffs, Tomato Peak, that sort of thing. You know, these woody weeds take over that very, very quickly, very easily. This photo here is courtesy of Land Care Research. This is Darwin's barberry. Once again, even though it's not growing underneath the canopy there, it's kind of taking over the whole area. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with the lodgepole pine or contorta situation, which, yep, again, so that's creating a monoculture in the area. This here is in one of the Havelock North reserves, Tairoa, and that's Old Man's Beard and banana passion fruit, doing a wonderful job of completely smothering, I think they're mahui underneath there. So that's what those weeds do. And lastly, I've put this one, and this one is actually on Banks Peninsula. And sometimes we create our own problems. So this is a Kiwi2 covenant, a small Kiwi2 covenant. And they had been advised to plant this here. Any guesses as to what it is? No,
Is it a senecio? No.
close.
Is it Harry Bryson?
No.
Senecio? No.
If any of you have got it in your garden, and when I say it, you'll immediately go, oh yeah, that stuff grows everywhere. Bracky got its grey eye, which doesn't belong down there. So why they were advised to plant it, I'm not quite sure. But they're having a real problem with it because grows very woody and it forms these kind of dense areas and it's quite hard to control. Yeah, so I just put that in as well, just to show sometimes we do things and we don't always make the right decisions, and sometimes we have to backtrack and go, oh, that was actually a mistake. You know, but they thought they were doing the best thing at the time, and they've actually also got a problem with tree lucerne, which there's a raging, well, I wouldn't say raging, but there's always a debate amongst ecologists about whether using tree lucerne in restoration projects is a good thing or not. But the thing here is that they've got a whole lot of naturally low stature areas. So they've got all these rock outcrops which are full of gecko, and they've got these gullies which are quite sort of forested, but there's also all these other areas. And so planting tree lucerne, which is a very tall species was always going to be a problem, because there was always going to be these areas here which would be vulnerable to invasion. So that's kind of led me on to my next.
Do you have a problem with Tradescantia as well?
With Tradescantia?
Yeah.
Yes, Tradescantia is a problem, yep. So in terms of Tradescantia, that's a ground cover, so it works in the same sort of mode as that English ivy, except ivy then climbs trees as well, which thankfully Tradescantia doesn't. Yeah, so that works in the same way, just stops that regeneration, and there might be the odd species that'll get through it, but generally it'll just shade out, but very difficult to control. So, when we're managing weed species, it's not that hard, but amazingly it does seem to be quite hard to do this consistently well, to do these 4 actions consistently well in all weed programs. I would say it is fairly rare. So, assess, prioritise, take action and monitor. Sounds easy. So, when we're talking about assessing, we really want to have a really good look around and get to know the extent of the weed, or the weeds. And this is a step that's easily missed out, and I've been involved in a number of weed programs that start off, there's only a few in here, go and get them. You know, away you go, next minute, oh no, it's everywhere. Oh, what are we doing? You know, we've started at the wrong end of things, and all of a sudden there's not enough money, and so you've wasted a whole lot of time and effort into doing things that, you know, could possibly have been done better. So a proper delimiting survey is a really good idea. So when we say delimiting, we're saying you know where your main infestations are, or where your bit of bushes, and you've maybe mapped your weed infestations. Well, just look a little bit further. Look a little bit further afield. Have a look at what else has potential to maybe get into your site, into your restoration site, and really know where all those weeds are. Can you see this here? It's not very clear, is it? So our good friend Jeff Walls, this is something that he designed, and it's called a rapid ecological assessment. And he designed it so Jeff Walls used to be the Conservancy Advisory Scientist, the DOC, when he lived here in Hawke State. And he designed it so that rangers could go out and do these ecological assessments without having to have too many instruments or all that much knowledge, just some basic knowledge. And if you Google rapid ecological assessments, you will get this come up. That's just one page of it, but it's really good because it makes you really look at your site and look at your site in more ways than one. And it also, just makes you really think about what you're doing. It doesn't take long to do. It's a little 4-pager, but it's a really, really good thing to do. So the other step in this process of assessing is, once you know what your weeds are, do some research on them. Find out how long they live for, how long they take before they seed, how long the seed is viable for. What else? How the seed is spread. Because those things there will give you a really good clue as to how long your program might need to be to control this weed, whatever weed it is. Although not always the information that you can get is correct, and we're involved in a Darwin's Barberry eradication attempt program, and that's with Troy, who's a QE2 rep.
And when she says eradication, she means...
Eradication. Well, we'd like to. But so a lot of our original plan was based on some work that was done by Kate McAlpine and others in Wellington. And they looked at how long the seed was viable for and how much of the seed germinated and what sort of lived. And she found that yes, a lot of seed germinated, but not much of it lived, and that it wasn't viable for very long. And we thought, great, this looks like this is going to be a success story. But where we're controlling it up on the Puketekere, I guess the conditions, climatic conditions are quite different, and we've got seed coming up 5-6 years after any adults in an area, and growing very quickly. And you know, we haven't done any experiments like she did, but just observationally, there's a lot of the seed is viable, and a lot of the seedlings that germinate do actually go on to become juveniles and grow up. We don't get them first. So yeah, really get to know your enemies, get to know what you're dealing with. The other thing is to check out your local regional pest management strategy, or I think they're called pest management programs now. There may be funding available, or it may also be compulsory to control whatever you've got. So yeah, have a look, get to know what you're talking about. So sorry, a couple of boring sort of slides here, but we'll get over these. So priorities, prioritise. And how do we prioritise? Which ones should we do first? So those with the worst impact, those that are going to cause the most ecological impact in your area that you're restoring. Try and stop the seeding cycle first, particularly for those things that seed very quickly. Sometimes it's really good just to do those things that require the least effort. Because they are pretty much the only easy wins that you have in weed control. If you've only got maybe one or two of a certain plant in there and you know it's a bit of a problem, can be a problem in other places, get rid of it quick. That's a win. Yeah, and then always treat outliers and satellite infestations before you treat the core. And these pictures here are also taken from a land care research weed management little pamphlet thing that you can get. So if the initial control focuses on core alone, so you haven't found out that you've got these other infestations there and you've only found the big one, or you've decided enough, we just want to go in and control the big lot first. Generally, what happens is that the core, when you go to do your next follow-up, the core will be reduced, but your outliers will get bigger. So that's a real core of weed management, is to do outliers first. So now that you know what you're going to do, you need to know how to do it. So this isn't a control workshop where we're going to talk about all the different kinds of control that there are, although we'll talk about a couple of specific things shortly. But there's heaps of advice out there. There's your regional council staff, there's doc staff, there's the weed control handbook, there's the Weed Busters website, there's this new one that's about to come out. This is produced with Weed Busters QE2 collaboration. It's called War on Weeds, and Mike Ehrlich and others have put that together. That's pretty good. It's got a whole lot of stuff in there about weed management. There's also this land care research weed management little pamphlet that's got some pretty good basic guides in it. Yeah, and the Weed Busters website, again, is also pretty good. So yeah, or you can, of course, talk to consultants. Give me a ring, might be $500 an hour. Okay, but one thing you do need to think about is that chemical use can be very hard on ecosystems if used wrongly. So be sure that you use registered chemical applicators, people that know what they're doing. Try and get some advice maybe from your regional council staff about what things you shouldn't be using. And a little note in here about, we're just getting into a little bit more detail about control of big trees such as willows or poplars or even pines. Kill them standing. Don't cut them down and then try and spray everything that's on the ground because they'll all just re-sprout. Okay, so that's, yeah. Any big trees, just kill them standing, and there's all sorts of different techniques that you can use to do that.
But be careful of the location they're standing.
Be careful of the location they're standing in, yep.
We used to have a drill in and have syringes and inject them with 2,4-D.
Oh, yeah, 2,4-D, yep, that'd kill it.
Upset the hormones in them.
Yeah, well there are plenty of different ways that that can be done. So drill and fill, drilling, basal barking. Those are all techniques that can be used to do that. But yeah. Right, so I've got a little exercise for you to do. This is Pretend Reserve. Welcome to Pretend Reserve. So what you're going to do is join up with your neighbour, 2 or 3, and have a little discussion about what weeds you would do first and what order would you prioritise to do these weeds. I'm going to tell you a couple of little things. Yellow flag iris, that's a total control plant. You have to control that. This ivy is seeding, these outliers are not. This here, these S's, these are sycamore, and this lot here is cedar. Yep, that's blackberry all up along the top. And here we've got a new planting with bits of blackberry close to it. And here's one adult Pampas plant in the neighbours. You've got 5 minutes.
Obviously, you're not sent box back, there's only one hand.
It's Pretend Reserve.
How much money we
Are they helping?
But it's not victory.
How you going? Do you need any more time? Okay, 5 minutes is up. How you going? Is everybody finished? More or less?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Who wants to share a little bit of what they got?
Well, I'll go with the Pampas and the neighbours.
Pampas on the neighbours? Yep, get an easy one.
Right, because I've killed them really easily organically, but not hundreds. And that's a neighbour, and they may be organic people. So, I hop the fence, and 2 ways of doing it. You get your secateurs. I've done huge bush. You cut, but if you get a chainsaw and cut, it just chokes the chainsaw. If you get a hedge trimmer, cut real low, really low, because it's a grass, it will come out through the centre in its ones. You just wait for a short while, if it's the right time of the year, and a new little shoot will come up. You just bend that down. Don't try and pull. If they're young, you can pull it out. You just bend it sideways and give a tug, and that's as dead as a doorknob, and you have a very dead Pampas bush. And any that come up on our place through forestry, popping the fence, I deal with it in 2 minutes, and there's no spray. That's my...
Love it. Yeah. Fantastic. Yeah. Yep. Anybody else want to share where they got to? We've got up the top of the list.
So we had the Pampas first too, just because it was a short, quick one. And also because there's new planting, normally I would say ignore the blackberry, but because it's a new planting there and it's going to be quite open, you don't want that getting in there and smothering those new trees. You just put in the surface.
Yep.
Priority.
How are
Excellent.
you killing it though? With a knapsack?
Don't know yet.
We've got
Long gloves.
Hey, anybody else want to go? Have a go where they got to? Yeah,
I was
Teresa.
thinking of the seeding ivy, to target that seeding ivy first.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yep. Only because I know how terrible it is.
Yeah.
And once it starts seeding, the seeds are actually pretty viable, and it will spread really quite quickly.
I always had the blackberry, the ivy, and the yellow flag iris all at the same time because it's the same chemical it's used to kill them. So.
Yeah. Okay, so you got the yellow flag iris in there pretty quickly as well.
Yeah.
Yep. Anybody else have that up?
Yep, we had the yellow flag iris, and just in order, maybe order of importance is NEs. The iris, the seeding ivy, the Pampas, and the sycamore outliers, the blackberry and the new planting, the sycamore patch, the ivy outliers, and the blackberry on the boundary last. At least important.
Well, you're not killing them as well. You're just picking which is first.
Well, we're trying to kill them as we go.
Yeah.
That's what we're saying. Kill us, kill them every step of the way.
How did you do the sycamore?
the ivy before the sycamore because it will spread quicker, closer to the plant. And perhaps antitropical or something in really still conditions.
For what? For the ivy?
Yeah.
Meets off urine. Meets off urine. But if the ivy's seeding, actually all you need to do is cut it.
Yeah.
Because the ivy only seeds once it climbs. So it has a juvenile form and an adult form. It only seeds in its adult form, and that it only becomes an adult once it climbs. So if you go and have a look at ivy somewhere, you'll see that the adult form, the leaf is very different. It doesn't have its points anymore. So it becomes.
And the stems get all like hairy almost, the really big ones.
Well, they do on the ground as well. But yeah, that's just their climbing technique. That's how they climb. So yeah, no, those are all good points. And this was my list that I came up with. So yellow flag irises, because they can be really difficult to kill, and it's a total control plant, and there wasn't that much of it. So kind of probably didn't want to get onto that. As you said, the adult pampas and the neighbours, it's an easy win, get onto it. The seeding ivy, because that's actually not that hard to do either, and it's going to spread. Blackberry by planting, as many of you said, just because it's going to really impact on your planting. Now this one here, can be a bit tricky whether you do the outlier sycamore or the adult core sycamore first. And probably one thing I would do is look up and see how long they take to seed. So if your outlier sycamore are already seeding, I'd be doing them first. So, but if they're only young plants, and this is seeding, and this might take another couple of years before they start seeding, I would maybe swap that around and do the adults first because they're still seeding. Yep. Then the outlier ivy, the core ivy, and then the other blackberry resources allowed. And as
I think maybe, I love your list, by the way. I think it's great. And when you're over doing number 2, like with the Pampas issue, you can convert the neighbor and take them along with you to do the rest of it.
My plan was to provide free food and drink one weekend and invite 30 of my friends to come and do it all in one day.
well, yeah, there is that too. But many of you who have done weeding will know, it won't be over in one day. You'll be going back.
And you won't have any friends. I'll be busy.
Okay, what if that's all on an organic property?
What if it's all on an organic property? Okay.
Because what do we kill sycamore with?
Glyphosate.
So little ones you can pull, bigger ones you can cut and paste even with a glyphosate gel, which is probably your least offensive, or a metsulfuron gel. You could possibly try, I mean I don't know, with sycamores you could probably
have the 30 people.
but big ones, you'd probably cut them down to start with, and maybe you could use a pine oil or something like that to try and stop them growing back.
If you
I
ring
know you
back,
have to do a bit of research on that, Marion.
if you ring back sycamore, like we had them cut down because they were going to land just on our house, and so we had them cut and they coppiced.
Yeah.
But if you ring barked, would they coppice?
I don't know. This is where your research comes into play. I don't know, but yeah, ringbarking may be the way so that you would organically.
Yeah.
They do coppice quite well. Drilling and poisoning.
Yeah.
But they're a real problem down the South Island, so I think Land Care have done work on them, so on the Google will have your answer probably.
Yeah, I mean that's what we've done. So Pete and Louise, who are from Central Hawke's Bay and work in Lindsay's Bush, will recognise that this has quite a bit of similarity to and what we've done there with the adult sycamore is drill and fill them. Yeah. I mean, but we've got like another 20 other weeds on top of that in Lindsay's Bush, which is Toki Reserve that Bruce was talking about this morning.
Is that a systemic? Is it a systemic poison?
What one?
That you used on the sycamore when you drill? Is it systemic? Is it going into the roots, and then if you plant something, does that have a time frame of poisoning whatever native you planted there?
So it depends what chemical that you're using. There's all sorts of different chemicals that you can use. So it depends whether it's a soil active or root active chemical.
Right.
So something like glyphosate doesn't tend to move in the soil and doesn't tend to sit in the soil for too long.
Right.
And so in an area like this, where this is already a bush, you don't need to plant anything.
Oh,
you've got your seed source already there. Yeah.
Okay.
How deep would the drill need to go?
So we're getting into a little bit of control technique here, but so what happens in a plant? How does a plant work?
It translocates itself.
How does it translocate its nutrients and water?
Through the xylem.
Through the xylem and phloem. So that's kind of, and through that sapwood and the xylem and phloem is where you're trying to target your poison to. You don't want to you don't need to get into the core, into the heart. So yeah, but that's particularly true for willows. If you go into the core, all your herbicide just goes into the middle and drains out and doesn't get taken up at all.
If you're drilling and filling, it pays to buy or hire out a petrol drill, power drill, because your electric drills won't last that long.
Yeah, or we actually use chainsaws, so we just do plunge cuts with chainsaws, which actually we find you get better because you've got more surface area than a drill. So you end up with a deep, like long shallow, whereas a drill you've only got, or depending on you.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, we're just getting into control techniques here. So, oops, wrong one. Just something I wanted to just touch on a little bit here with this take action. And this is part of the long-term thing, is surveillance. And once again, if you want to know how to do surveillance, there's a whole lot of information on the net, just look it up. But it's basically looking. You need to be out there looking and seeing what's coming in. If you do a planting or you've got a place that you're looking after and you don't get out there and look, and then you go there 2 years later and oh my God, it's full of blackberries. Like, well, hello, you need to be out there looking at what's going on. Anyway, we need to just move on a little bit here, so thanks very much for that. Just a very quick thing on monitoring, although it shouldn't be a very quick thing, because the whole point of monitoring is to work out whether your management regimes and your control regimes are actually working and you're reaching your objective. Without monitoring, it's pretty hard to work out whether that's happening. So there's a few different ways that you can do it. You can map. You can use photographic records, which are really good for advocacy and for showing people, especially if you've got funding from somewhere. The photographic records are really good for showing how you've reduced your population. Recording density, so actual count or visual estimate. So a visual estimate would be like a percentage cover, so you might have a 2 by 2 plot and you'd say, 100% cover with ivy before I started. A year later, go back, do the same plot on 2% cover. Okay, so that sort of thing, that sort of monitoring. And the other thing you can do is record the age class, the adults and juveniles. And so you should be getting a reduction in adults and over time, and then over more time a reduction in juveniles, depending on how long your seed is viable for. So just a couple of quick examples. This is from the Mangahina stream up in Pātuka. This is one of the few Cathedral Bells sites in Hawke's Bay. I had to put a picture of Cathedral Bells because I thought probably most of you would never have seen it. It's a beautiful plant, but it's like a triffid on steroids. It can grow 20 metres in a year and seed within 6 months of germination. So it's been very difficult to get rid of, and we've been working on it for quite a number of years. But anyway, in December 2011, this was the mapping of the active sites, and September of this year, that was the mapping of the active sites now. So you can see we've gone down from 30, whatever sites down to 7 sites, and now we're actually counting plants at the sites as well. So we've got a double thing there, we're mapping as well as counting individuals, so that we can see that we're getting a reduction. Where are the problem areas? Well, it's all a bit of a problem area actually. So there's that kind of way of monitoring and mapping. So there's a lot of data in there. Just focus on this very top line, Pampas 1 and 2. So in 2018, we got 2 adults and 9 juveniles. So I sort of did this the wrong way around, but in 2017 we got 0 adults, 2016 6 adults, 2015 4 adults, and then on the other side you can see that the juveniles have finally started to reduce So 2015, close to 140, 120, 2016, 110, 2017. This last year, finally, the seed sources, the seed bank is being used up, and we're finally getting on top of it. So you can do that sort of thing. And as I said, the whole purpose of monitoring, putting some kind of monitoring thing in, is to make sure that you're achieving your objective. So much of what I've talked about today is about existing native cover, but many of you will probably be working on areas where you're planting or converting pasture. So the same rules apply. Assess, have a look at what's nearby. If there's blackberry nearby, yes, that's going to come in. If there's pampas nearby, yes. Because you've got, once you stock to eat an enormous amount of weeds. They definitely do keep weeds down. Once the stock stop eating, and you've got all these areas that are vulnerable to weed invasion, you will get weeds. There can be no doubt about it. So,
Do you find them in a closed canopy much? Okay.
Find weeds in a closed canopy? Not as much, but yes, there are weeds that will grow in a closed canopy. Yeah. So, reduce the likelihood of weeds taking over your hard work. So, spot spray first. That is what we do, my advice. Grass is allopathic, so it will compete with your newly planted plant. Use a mulch, and we tend to use these wool mats because they're really easy to transport and easy to put on. These are made of dags, so they've also they degrade within sort of 12 to 18 months. So they actually add some nutrients to the soil as well. And it's a preventative measure. But of course you can use whatever you like. You can use Friday trays. So lots of people use Friday trays. There's a woman in Canterbury who's planting 100,000 plants a year, and she's only using Friday trays.
Sorry, what trays?
So Friday trays, I meant to bring something along actually. They're like the apple trays, the apple cartons. And if you talk nicely to your local packing house, you'll be able to get, because they get lots of seconds and lots of ones that get water damage and stuff that can't be used in for the export market, so you can get them and you put a couple together. They're a bit more of a hassle because they're hard to rip, so you have to cut them on a bandsaw or something to make them a bit easier to use. Of course you can use carpet as well, although that has its limitations. Or you can use hay or whatever, but a mulch, particularly here in Hawke's Bay where it is so dry, a mulch really makes a difference. If there are problem plants in your area, such as Crescentia, periwinkle, bindweed, greater bindweed, that can be very difficult to plant amongst. My advice is to take care of them first. It is very difficult to control weeds in an area that's already been planted because you just end up killing stuff that you've put money and time into planting. You can do maintenance of weeds in areas that have just been planted, as long as you're down to like hand pulling seedlings or something like that. Then that's the sort of viable thing. Try not to make your spot that you're spraying, try not to make it too much bigger than whatever mulch you're using, because it just opens up a whole area to weed invasion. And that may only be thistles, but that will still affect your planting success. Let's talk about Muhlenbeckia. Who knows it? What do you think of it?
Wonderful, because it's butterfly.
Yes, we have our two diverging opinions. Horrible stuff, wonderful stuff.
Well, we got it.
So Muhlenbeckia's got a job to do. Its job particularly this one, the Australis, is to grow up on the outside of trees or bushes where there's been a big tree come down in the forest, or somehow there's been some kind of natural clearing. Its job is to grow up on the outside and create shade and a wind barrier to allow seedlings to grow up underneath. Very rarely does it kill anything that it's growing over. However, it can be a real problem if it's growing in grass where you're about to plant, because it will want to grow over it, and with it being a small plant, it will grow over it and probably kill it. So if you were having this area where there's Muhlenbeckia, I'd say just leave it, because there's a whole lot of seeds and things that are on here that will bring birds, and if you've got other native plants nearby, those birds will be bringing those other seeds. Pretty soon you'll actually have other plants coming through it. And I have actually seen it taking over blackberry as well. So, I know some people, I have seen some people trying to control it, and I'm not sure of the success rate of that. Have you got any thoughts on that, Bruce?
Well, again, it's all about the context, isn't it? It's about what you're describing as the different contexts. And in some really small patches of forest, and I mean really small, like, less than a hectare, and people's, like in an urban area where a person in their own backyard is trying to do something, and sometimes they may need to snip the odd Muhlenbeckia.
Yep.
Otherwise the Muhlenbeckia will, affect things badly. But you're absolutely right, it's all about context. So you actually have to have a good look at what's in front of you and then make your decision. Don't just sort of make up a rule that I hate Muhlenbeckia or I love Muhlenbeckia. It's like you've actually got to think about it.
Yeah.
What about Estonia as opposed to Australis?
A stone or complexa you might be talking about? Or a stone, the eye?
No, Estonia is the
So stony eye is a little shrub?
Yeah.
well, it can be little, it can be bigger in Hawke's Bay.
Yeah.
Not as bad as Australis, obviously.
Yeah, so you might be talking about complexes, probably the other one is with a small leaf. And that's very scrambling as well. And again, put it in context. It's a fantastic coastal plant, provides great food for lizards and birds. But yeah, if you put it next to plants that you've just tried to grow, it will grow over them and it will smother them.
Yeah, we planted some out at the Cat Sanctuary to grow over old fences and summer blackberry.
Yep.
That's the job it's planted for.
Yeah, and it's done that?
Yeah, it's getting there, which is good. Yeah, like the June.
Yep. So blackberry. It's a pain, isn't it? It truly is. And I'm going to talk about this a bit more because Belinda asked me at lunchtime if I would talk a bit more about this. So, yes, this is an area that's been mocked up. Here's blackberry here and blackberry taking over here. And if you left it in your plantings, it would look like that as well. There'd be the odd plant that comes up through it. Quite often in Hawke's Bay, the strain of blackberry that we've got here is very large-leaved and often has quite thick stems as well. And there are some people that are using it as a nurse crop. And this is a Covenant just north of Tutera. And he's using blackberry here as a nurse. So all of this all here is all blackberry all up here. But even there, even though he's got a seed source close by, from my observations, the blackberry is so thick that it's not actually letting any of those seedlings come up. And even though there has been some research done in some places that's shown that yes, it's a great nurse crop. I don't know. My observations doesn't support that. And so I have seen quite good success using a light spray of glyphosate on blackberry to allow seedlings. So it may not kill the blackberry completely, but it burns it off enough to allow a cohort of seedlings to come up through and take take over. So, you know, blackberry doesn't like shade. I mean, it will grow in partial shade, but it doesn't, you know, it won't grow as well. And all you're worried about in terms of ecological restoration is that it's not, you know, it's not the main plant that's there. If there's a bit of blackberry within your bush or around the edge, you know, ecologically it doesn't really matter. But when it's, yeah, so, yeah, the other thing, in this particular common is that there's old man's beard in here, and the blackberries harbouring old man's beard and making access really difficult. You know, we're not seeing the old man's beard until it's actually seeding. So, yeah, it can be a problem. And you know, I think there'll probably be more work done on that in the future to maybe. One thing you could consider if you've got lots of blackberry is introducing a rust. So that's a biological control, and so that does stop the seeding, and it can reduce the amount of leaf on it as well. So that can do the same thing in terms of giving you know, letting a cohort of seedlings come up through it. So I don't have any great answers to that. Belinda did want to know what spray to use. Like if you really want to kill it, metsulfuron and glyphosate mixed together does a great job.
Have you got any ideas on Japanese honeysuckle and bamboo?
Japanese honeysuckle, metsulfuron and glyphosate mixed together, had it in autumn.
Autumn.
Had it in autumn.
So the other context I've encountered with blackberry is where you get a big blackberry patch, but you don't have the native bush nearby. Yeah. And I've seen two good things. I've seen examples of two good things that people have done where, first of all, they've planted native trees and shrubs around the patch of blackberry, and then they've, in some cases, they've used clay balls with the seed of the native plant embedded in it, and because you know, then you don't have to get in the blackberry patch. You can stand on the edge and toss them in, and introduce the missing seedlings that you need to get established underneath it.
Could you do that like with epiphytes too?
With epiphytes, I don't know of anybody who's done it that way, but
It's not a good idea. You can slingshot them up the trees.
yeah, we use slingshots to sample the leaves sometimes, so you can probably use the slingshot to do the same.
Bruce, apart from sounds like fun, have you seen the end result?
Yeah, so I've seen examples where that worked. Now, again, I'll come back to the context, because the climate situation and the soil situation you're in is critical for, is the blackberry got a completely comprehensive cover that's stopping stuff from coming through as you're describing, Kay? Or are you in an environment where the, you know, when it dies back in autumn and winter, things progressively come up underneath it? Again, you've just got to, you know, you've actually got to observe and then make your call.
And I agree with that, and I would also think about if it's seeding and birds are eating it and moving it around a lot. So even if it's a tiny patch, it might be a great seed source, or terrible seed source. So maybe getting rid of it if it's doing that.
In our situation, we've deer-proofed our covenants, so they've got electric fencing, conventional fence below, and 2 hot wires running. And what happens is the blackberry comes up, where the stock are eating on one side, that's clean. And even the goat, because we have Wairoa's goat country, so we have goats now. I always keep them a paddock away from the covenant, so as soon as you take them out of the grazing paddock, the blackberries come along as soon as you close down the covenant, and they shade it. It gets shaded out, but where you're running your electric fence to keep the deer out, the blackberry comes up, hits the second wire on the top. Now for, God knows, 30 years I've been fighting those same blackberries. Very diligent, dug them all out, and you know what that means, they all come back up again. And so I'm just saying that we got a Stevenson grant to use a helicopter, and spray word to me is just hell. You know, it's a word I've never used. It's just horrible. But you can fight this, and we'll have deer back in the covenants. And then we have some areas that were clearings in amongst all of this bush, and they are huge blackberries. And we have Hawke's Bay Regional Council coming through on their big expensive bikes to do predator control work, and it's now become dangerous because you don't know where there's a hole or not. So I'm scrub barring all the tracks, and I've promised to spray, but the helicopter's going to come in. I have sleepless nights because we've got thousands of beautiful lush seedlings of all the big trees, tawa, titoki, pukatia, all of those. They're all there right on the edge. That's why I asked you how close can we come. I've researched everything, and spray drift. Now the helicopter guy, Doc uses him, he's #1 man, they all think, to use, but you've got to do it in the morning when there's no heat at all, keep it cool. He puts it into, I just talked to him again, so it's water drops coming on and no spray drift. But to me, I fly to that Waikawa and I know this helicopter, whatever you call it, wind force. And so I said I would cut. There's another huge job, is to cut around all of these blocks, and he would just do the central area. And then I would knapsack spray. But I'm old, and I'm sick to death of fighting bloody blackberries. And so, in fact, I got that money, and then all of our place suddenly is beautiful. And we have these dragonflies. They're not plants, but because of our plants and wetlands, we have 10 species of dragonfly. They've become huge now. We get scientists in to look at these dragonflies. The top photographers come in to photograph them for this book coming out. And so that's where, you know, I love dragonflies. And they patrol on the grasslands, and the grasslands are disappearing because of the blackberry. And so, you know, I came here to hear that this would be magic and my blackberries would bloody well go.
No pressure.
Yeah, sorry, we can't magic blackberry away. It is a pain.
And it's the only weed we have. Nothing else is naughty on our place. Nothing.
I would be very careful using a helicopter.
I know.
I've seen terrible results with that.
He said he
but
would
I have
come
seen
back.
some good results as well. But
Yeah. We get a very still day, do you? And he sits high up and just shoots. Because I thought he had a boom. He's not using a boom. He's just got a little shielded gun. Yeah. I've nailed him. And he scared me. So.
that's probably the best magic you can use. Get on your broomstick. Yeah.
I'll give you an update one day.
I don't know. Maybe get Troy to come and have a look as well. Do you
Yeah.
know it?
Malcolm's patch, yeah.
No, Malcolm's back.
Oh, yeah. It's,
And we've got all these, you know.
Send me some photos, Belinda.
I've got loads. My name's Jill.
Oh, Jill.
Yeah, it's magic being Belinda
Why
for a
don't
day.
I
And the other is that why you have aquatic life, you know, because we have all these wetlands.
Yeah.
But there's only one place where we're going to do it. The wetlands, to me, the shade will just kill. There's nothing. They're not a worry. And that's a worry to me because we get long-finned eels and you know, banded cockapoo, all sorts of, and all the other magic things that. So has anyone got advice, please?
Well, maybe we can carry this conversation on a bit later. We'll just carry on with the presentation.
Sorry, right.
That's all right. Yeah, maybe some photos and things might be. Right, we've got 10 minutes to talk about animal pests. So just go back to our easy. Yeah. Let's go back to our pyramid of life and just check out where they fit in. Predators and browsers. So browsers, what harm do they do? Aren't browsers a natural part of our ecosystem? Well, yeah, so what have we got? What browsers have we got?
Deer.
Goats, possums, pigs,
Rabbits.
hares, stoats. Who said stoats? You know stoats are not browsers?
Wallabies soon.
Wallabies, maybe. Hares. Yep. Although not in Hawke's Bay.
Insects.
Insects, yes, we do have insects, pigs, maybe pigs.
Is that cow?
What might we have had here? More.
Insects.
Parker hay. What is that Parker hay at some stage? Kakapo. Pukeko.
They used to have that ancient eagle, didn't they? Some eagle.
They did have an eagle, but it definitely was not a browser. So this is a photo again from Puahanui Bush where there's now no ivy, but there's also no seedlings growing back. Why? Mr. Rabbit. But very much the same as what some of those weeds do with the browsers, taking out that whole understory, that whole layer, and depending on how high they get, these as well. But also taking out any seedlings, the regeneration from your canopy and emergent layer. So we generally do need to do something about them. It's the same management process, fancy that. Assess, find out what's there. Where are they living? Where are they moving? Where are they eating? What are they eating? How many are there? Which is always the hard question. How do you measure what they are? And then, again, do some research on your control options, which we're going to talk a little bit about. And I'm going to talk a little bit about monitoring as well. So rule number 1, yes defence. So stock, someone was saying, oh, it's amazing what happens when you take the stock out. Yep. Stock, do a huge amount of damage. And if you're doing plantings, yeah, make sure you get the fence up first. A hot wire around the fence generally ends in, hot wire around your piece that you're going to do generally ends in disaster. Yeah. At some stage, yeah, no good. Get a decent fence. And really, I probably should have put up in Hawke's Bay deer fencing because deer in Hawke's Bay have become a real problem. So, aim to reduce your numbers. Hunting, poisoning, it's long term. There's going to be reinfestation. And some species respond to pressure on the population by increasing their birth rates, increasing fertility. So there's no magic thing. You have to look at these things in an integrated fashion, which integrated pest control is a term that's been around in the horticulture industry. I was talking horticulture this morning. It's not a term that gets used a lot in ecological restoration. And I think we actually need to be using that term and need to be thinking about integrated pest control much more regularly. Protections for plantings. These are tubings from Advanced Landscapes. You just and cut your own size. They've worked really, really well. There's the Friday tray on, but you can buy ready-made cages. There's combi guards, and there's the repellents. Has anybody used the repellents? Yeah. Yeah. Ollie. Yeah. Had success. Yeah. Yeah. Seems to be pretty good, eh? Both of them pretty good. And the plant skid, because it repels deer as well. So as deer populations in Hawke's Bay increase, which they steadily are, and they become more of a problem for some of our plantings, that might be something that we need to look at more. So our predators, yeah, so I'm just sort of whipping through this because we're getting out of time.
It's so cute.
They are, right?
One of cats, like when we go fishing at Mana here, it's Diamond's Beach in the bush above, you can hear them at night. They were just, there was lots.
Yep. So yeah, feral cats. People tend to think, oh, they've dumped the cats, oh. But the reality is, feral cats are naturalised in our landscape. Absolutely. Hedgehogs, we forget to think about hedgehogs, but they do quite a bit of damage. I'm not sure if there's been, Chris Jones was trying to get a PhD student to do some more work on hedgehogs. So we don't actually know that much about them. there's been a little bit of work done in Boundary Stream actually, quite a few, maybe 10 years ago or something now, and
Number one nest predator in the braided rivers.
oh yeah, there's been a bit of work done on the braided rivers and black silk stuff, yeah, definitely. We've got one of the mustelids here, and we've got a rat here. Anybody know what kind of rat that is?
Norway.
Yeah, it's a Norway. It's a Norway. How do you tell? Short tails.
Yeah.
So a Norway rat, the tail usually only goes up to about halfway, 2/3 up. A ship rat, the tail will be right up to his head. Ship rats tend to be smaller, and the ship rats are arboreal, so that means they live in the trees. We tend to always think of rats living in the ground. The ship rats are arboreal, that's why they're such a problem for birds.
And the fur is generally darker than the shipping?
Yeah, so these are generally sort of brown. The shippies tend to be sort of more of a grey and a more whiter underneath. Yeah.
And they've got those suckers on their feet, little sucker things on there. Yeah. They're little knobby all over their feet for gripping.
Right.
And they're pretty. They've got beautiful
They are
wings.
pretty, aren't they?
Pretty. The other one.
Okay, who knows which mustelid this is? Apart from Troy and others who will know.
It's a stoat.
It's a stoat. How did you tell?
Little bushy tail.
The bushy tail. Yep. So just for those who may not know about the different mustelid species. So up the top we've got the ferret. They are cute. Look at them. They have this little band across them there. Generally, they have the band across there, and they're generally about the size of a cat. Makes it look bigger.
And they stink.
They can do. When they're put under pressure, they stink. They all stink. Now this is your stoat. So he's got the tail, always got a black tip to his tail. Always. So if you're ever not quite sure, and then this is the weasel, and they've got a very stumpy tail. Sometimes their tails are only like this long. Very stumpy. And then this here is the difference in size between a stoat and a weasel's head. So the weasels, although some weasels can be as big as a stoat, especially if you've got a juvenile stoat and an adult weasel, they can be kind of the same size, but generally there is quite a size difference.
How long can they live for, right?
How long do they live for?
How can they live for?
So all the mustelids are what is known as R strategists, and that means they have a very short life cycle and do quite a lot of breeding in that time. So they're able to breed quickly, and they die quickly. So in the wild, generally, a lot of stoats will die in their first year, but they can live for quite a number of years. And I'm not sure, I should know, but probably, I don't know, probably 5 or 6 years old they could probably live to, I would imagine. But generally, in the wild, most of them don't live over a year.
And they're pregnant when they come out, don't
They
they?
do. The stoats are. So the stoats have a very different breeding system than the weasels or the ferrets. So the weasels and ferrets mate, get pregnant and give birth all in the same time period. And that means that they can actually take advantage of lots of high food densities. So if there's a lot of food around, they can give birth multiple times in a year and up to 3 times a year. So, whereas our stoats, they are mated in the den. Around about now actually, male stoats will be cruising around looking for dens. The female will have her kits in the den, and she may have anything from 2 to 15 kits, and the male will impregnate the adult female as well as any female kits. So they are only about 6 weeks old at the moment. So somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks old, they will be impregnated. And then they have this thing called delayed implantation. So those of you who know about this kind of stuff, that it forms a blastocyte, and then it just stops, and it sits in the womb, but it's not implanted. When summer goes by, everybody's having a nice time eating birds and mice and lizards. Come through the winter if they're still alive. And there's a lot of food around, then those blastocytes will implant, and she might have 14 or 15 eggs that have been fertilised. They'll all implant into the womb, and she'll be able to grow all of those kits on. If there's not very much food, she'll actually absorb some of those blastocytes, and only a smaller number will get implanted into her womb. So that's why when you hear about, you get the stoat eruptions after a mouse plague in the beech forest, it's always a year later, because the stoats actually can't respond to that huge amount of food in the same year. So yeah, I digress once again, but it is the same thing about knowing your target. So when you're talking about trapping predators, you actually want to know where they're living, assess what they're eating, how do we go about trapping them, because they can be really hard to trap. Sometimes they can be easy, you get the easy one. So as I said again, it's that same management actions, and the control options are fairly limited: poisoning, trapping, hunting and shooting. And as I said, one of the best things about the Predator Free New Zealand initiative is that there's heaps of research going on. And so there's probably been more movement in the last 2 or 3 years than there has been for the 10 years previously, in terms of where we're going with new traps and new ideas, and money actually being put into researching some of those ideas. So poisons, baits and bait stations, most of that work has been done for possums and rats. And most of the bait that you will be using is anticoagulants. So you do have to be pretty careful with them. One that's predominantly used in Hawke's Bay is called Griffiths. It's known as a 2nd generation anticoagulant. It has a really long half-life. Anybody know what a half-life is? Yeah.
How long it takes to break down?
So how long for 50% of the product to be gone? Yeah. So Britifcum is 18 months. It's a heck of a long time. DOC actually don't allow it to be used on any of their land, because we don't actually know what the really long-term effects of that is going to be. It's been found in kiwi, it's been found in deer, it's been found in kōkako. Yeah.
Would skinks eat it?
No, but skinks might eat invertebrates that have eaten it. Yeah, so yeah, you do have to be really careful. There are 1st generation anticoagulants, but the reason 2nd generation anticoagulants were developed was because of resistance in England. So you do have to be, again, do a bit of research about what you're doing. And one of the things is don't have your bait out there all the time, because that will develop resistance. One of the things with rats now is that you need to try and have your bait station as close to the ground as you can. Even though there's quite a bit of evidence that rats can get in here and they'll climb all over, the idea is to make it, especially when you're getting your population quite low, make it as easy as you possibly can for them to get to the bait.
Okay, just a comment on that I've got on trail cam birds hopping up to the edge of that. And a chew on, it was ratabait, so the cereal, the paste, not the pellets. Also, I've seen birds hopping around home with little blue pellets in their mouth. So
nice.
It's a real thing that sparrows and the likes will get stuck into it.
Yeah, so there are a range of different bait stations, and these are probably one of better ones. You've probably seen other ones that are really open, and of course lots of things will probably go into those open ones. But here, these ones with the lips, I mean, often people put these around the other way, because they think, oh, everyone, things are going to get into it a lot easier, but that actually opens it up quite a bit more for other things to get in.
What about the ones up the trees, like we've got all over our place?
With the orange lids.
Yeah.
Yep, people use them because they're cheap.
It's regional council.
Yeah, I know.
When they were, we used to have hundreds of possums and we have next to none.
Yeah, well this is why Verificum is used. It is highly effective.
And
Highly effective.
We have cyanide.
Yep.
Have a question.
So, just one other thing. So PAP is a new poison that, well, it's relatively new, as ways are still being used, and worked out how to use that in the best way. But it's pretty exciting because it targets cats and stoats, and we haven't actually had a poison that will do that. And so both cats and stoats can be really hard to trap. You can get individuals that just, you'll never get them in a trap. And so to have a poison available to mop up those animals is really exciting.
It has a 5-kilometre radius that you can identify every landowner within a 5-kilometre of using town.
Yes,
Which
so
makes that a
you
really
need to have a controlled substance license to use it, and there are some very stringent, so it's 5 kilometres in some instances and 3 kilometres in others. So
I think it's come down to even the 3 kilometres, or it's in the process of coming down. I think.
Okay, yeah.
And I think you actually need a cat ticket.
yeah, you
just
do
because
need a controlled substance license.
not just a controlled substance. Back when I did it, you actually had to do a PAT course.
Yeah, so controlled substance ticket for PAC is what you need.
What do they put it in? What is it in?
Meat.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So sorry, just, yep.
What happened to the rabbit boards they used to have around the rabbit?
So the question is, what happened to the rabbit boards? They got integrated into regional councils.
Khaleesi virus killed them out.
Talk to your local politicians.
Yeah. They used to be quite effective. They used to have them out at OU. You know what's going out.
Don't be surprised if something like that comes back. So, just very quickly, a little bit about trapping. So there's all sorts of new traps coming out with all this predator-free New Zealand, new kind of tunnels, live traps, and which are generally cage and leg hold traps. Just remember that they do need to be checked once every 24 hours to come up to National Animal Welfare Committee standards. And kill traps. So there are kill traps out there that don't come up to those standards that are for sale and are highly effective. So you have, but if you're working on Crown land or you're receiving funding from people that require you to be up to those, have those standards, then you do need to be aware of those. For example, good old fen trap, which doesn't come up to National Animal Welfare Committee standards, but was used for quite a long time in the UK and did quite a good job, and still does quite a good job, but yeah. That's a ferret in there. The future will be looking at lots of self-resetting traps. So most of you will have heard of the good nature traps. There's been some very successful marketing going on around them. Whether the real product is as successful is being debated by ecologists around the place at the moment. Yeah. Let's just say they've had problems, and they're not a silver bullet. Lots of people think, oh, I'll put them out and it will be sweet. But it just needs to be one of the tools that you have in your toolbox. If you haven't seen this already, have a look at New Zealand Auto Traps. So they won the Innovation Award at the field days. So they've got a couple of traps where they've got these little wheels that reset the traps, and they're doing that on DOC 200s and also a possum trap as well. And you know, I think there'll be more and more of these sorts of things coming in, and you know, that's going to be the way of the future. Long life lures. So it doesn't matter if you have a trap that's self-resetting and you don't have to go and check it once every 6 months. If you've got no lure or something to make that trap attractive to an animal to go into, you're still going to have to go and rebait or recheck it. So there's a number of different things sort of happening in that space at the moment, and sound lures, and some of you might have heard of the Cacophony project. No, look that up if you haven't heard of it, that's pretty interesting. And one of the other things that's happening and been on the go for a while is using ferret bedding and trying to actually chemically simulate the pheromones that are in the urine of ferrets, and so it seems to be very attractive to cats and all the mustelids when it's still active. Yeah, so there's quite a lot of research going on into all of that at the moment. The same as weeds, your monitoring is actually pretty important, because you could be spending a whole lot of time setting up traps. I know we've just been working with a group recently that have just put all these A24s all through their place. Oh, we've done a marvellous job. Then when we went to monitor, no, they're still running at 80% rats. What a waste of time and money. So you really need to get a handle on that. And there's a whole lot of there's a few different ways that you can use. And so you can use your trapping data as a catch per unit effort, but there's usually so much variance in a year to year. So you might get a year with a lot of ferrets are around, like there's been a lot of rabbits and there's a lot of ferrets. So saying that you caught more ferrets in that year is not really much of a comparison to saying you didn't catch many the year before. With the possums, many of you will be familiar with the residual trap catch. So that's doing a certain number of traps over a certain number of nights and expressing that as a percentage. And then you can use signs such as prints or scats or chewing. And really what's happened in the last few years is it's come down to a few things. Tracking tunnels. So for those of you who don't know, this is a commercially available cheap one. You can make your own with core flute. And again, you can make your own cards, but these are commercially available ones with ink already in them. And you pop that in, put some lure on the end of your tunnels, and particularly for rodents, rats and mice, you can get some pretty good results. These ones in here are actually all insects. So yeah, insects we can just show you that you've got sort of ground insects crawling around the place. There are actually cat tracking tunnels out and about at the moment. I'm not sure of the efficacy of them, but you know anything about them, Bruce?
About the which one?
The cat tracking tunnels?
No.
No. So people are using them, but just if they really are telling you what's around or not.
Opus has designed the electronic one. I don't know if you've seen that one yet or not. It's pretty cool. But it's not a full tunnel, it's kind of a funnel type thing. But they can identify down to millipedes and all kinds of things on these tracking tunnels, and it automatically goes, if you're in the bush, it'll connect to other ones and it'll connect to the cloud, and you know exactly what's in your tracking tunnels at the time.
Wow.
Opus has developed them. It's not commercially, they've got a few going in trials, but yeah, it'll be a really cool tool to use, especially when you're in remote areas.
Yeah. Yeah, so things like that are being developed at the moment. There's a lot of stuff like that that's in the pipeline that in the next few years is going to kind of revolutionise the way we do animal control. So camera trapping is one of the things that's really being worked on at the moment as well, and there is a bit of a standard out at the moment that whether it's an interim standard or not, I'm not quite sure, but 21 nights, and then analysing that data, and there's some programs that are being developed to help you analyse the data as well, because as you can imagine you get hundreds and hundreds of shots. But we've been using them more to sort of see what we're not catching, and they've been quite useful for that, because that's an old trappers thing. It's not really so much about what you're catching, it's actually about what you're not catching. And we reckon Well, we reckon there's probably about 20% of animals that we never catch, that we see on cameras that we never ever catch. Yeah. Which is pretty annoying sometimes.
For mustelids, Kay, what's the best monitoring?
That's a good question. Yeah, so there is one monitoring tool that's a protocol that's to have tracking tunnels 200 metres apart for a cave.
Laced with?
Meat in the middle, so you put the meat in the middle for them. But yeah, there's, you know, it's the same as yeah, it's probably a bit of a luck of the draw whether you actually get a stoke going through them or not. But yeah, people do use them, and I mean that is the thing about the protocols. You're talking about relative abundance, so that people, you know, your abundance is only relative to what anybody else is doing, and so you're comparing apples with apples. Whereas if you go and do something different and then you say to people, oh, I've got no stoats, and people will be like, how do you know? And you'll be saying, oh, well, I did this monitoring. It's like, well, if nobody else is using that, it's very hard to compare what you've done with anybody else.
Just a comment, Kay, I think it depends who's funding it and how big the project is, because if you're just doing your own thing in your own place, really, it's not like you're going to stop trapping, so you might as well put your time and energy into just resetting the traps that you've got or expanding it or whatever.
Yep.
And keep on going.
Yeah, that's right.
Is there any merit in changing the position of the traps around it?
Yes, absolutely. Yep. So
Seasonally or seasonally or?
Well, that's a good question, because sometimes when you've been trapping in one place for a number of years and you've got your traps in the same place, it's, you know, it's quite a mission to go and move them all. But yeah, it can make a huge difference, because the animals get very habituated to seeing what's in there, and even moving them 20 metres can make a big difference.
That's
And
where,
changing your lure, changing your bait.
if you're trapping, record it on the Trap NZ website. You sign up your own little thing on there, but we can use that data eventually, and we can mine that data and say, all right, if you're trapping this, and use that microhabitat data, and we can say, hey, you know, these are the areas that you want to target, you know, for different things. So Trap NZ is a really good, you register it and you tell them where your traps are, you GPS them in, and actually it's a really good database because you keep track of your things. But those answers of where we put the traps and what timing, with this big database, eventually we'll be able to mine that data and all of a sudden say, hey, we need to, you know, there's these pulses, or these are the best times, best places to deal with them. And I think we'll get a lot of data from that, and it'll be a really cool, once we get everybody on it, it'll be a really cool database.
Can be a bit painful to use sometimes, I have to say.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
But even if you're not up for that, just keep your records. Really important to keep your own records so you get an idea. You can look at it from year to year, because, you know, for your own project it makes, what Kay said before, is correct, but for your own project it's really a good tool.
Yeah, absolutely. So, sorry that's been quite long. We've covered quite a bit of ground, but I just want to end with a couple of things. One is, yep, that first slide, decide what you want, where you want to be, what outcomes you want. And that really does depict how much sort of time and energy, effort, money you put into pest control as well. And so my last little play is, for those of you who haven't seen this is an action plan, Biodiversity Strategy Action Plan 2017 to 2020. This is a really big step forward for Hawke's Bay, and one of the things I've been really excited to see here today is there's a whole lot of new faces of people that are interested in ecological restoration and biodiversity that we don't sort of see in many of our other forums and things that we have. One of the actions in here is, well, there's two of the actions in here. There's a couple of bits of infrastructure that have been set up to try and take the strategy through to 2050. And one of those things is a foundation that's been set up to secure funding for the long term, and we're talking big amounts of funding to allow more ecological restoration work to go on in Hawke's Bay. And the other is a thing called the Biodiversity Guardians of Hawke's Bay. It's an incorporated society run by a management committee, of which actually Troy and myself and Nathan are on. Membership to this is, we're encouraging anybody that's interested in biodiversity at all to become members. Membership is $20 a year for an individual, $50 for a family or marae, and then there's a couple of other categories for businesses and corporates. And University of Waikato and EIT are both corporate members, for which we're very grateful and really, really pleased to be working together with them. But yeah, I would just encourage any of you, go and have a look at our website. It is biodiversityhb.org.
Follow us on Facebook.
Or follow us on Facebook, yeah. We've got lots of events, but the big thing is we're trying to get all the people that are involved in this thing to kind of come together. And we're holding forums a couple of times a year to just with the main idea of being networking and learning about projects and learning from each other. So we held the first forum last weekend in Arawana, which was pretty successful. So yeah, that's just my plug for Biodiversity Guardians.
And most of the money that your membership fees goes on ground work. It's not going to be for
meetings and coffees.
Yep. It's going on the groundwork.
Yeah, and we're all doing that voluntarily as well, so you know, your money's not going towards paying us or anything like that. We're doing it because we believe in it, and we see it as a way forward for making things better in Hawke's Bay. Thank you very much.